Right, it is a Thursday, and that means we have our weekly feature on the record. Today's focus is on the safety of learners in schools and sexual assaults that happen to learners, particularly when they are perpetrated by teachers. To discuss this situation, I'm joined by three guests who really will look at this issue from all sides. And I'm joined, of course, by Xolani Fakude, who is the Head of Secretariat with the South African Democratic Teachers Union, SADTU. We also have Enoch Rabotapi, who's the Chief Director, Education, Human Resources Development in the Department of Basic Education. And we're also joined by Matakanye Matakanye, who is the Secretary General of the National Association of School Governing Bodies. I mean, let me start with you, Ndate Matakanye. Just, I suppose, also from the perspective of the parents, right? I read of a story of a 15-year-old girl who is alleged to be having an affair with a 43-year-old teacher at her school, and this began when this learner was 12 years old, and her grandmother was aghast. She's the caregiver of this child, and just asked this question: what does she know? She's a baby. What does she know of relationships between a man and a woman? It's just one example, and yet they are all too, they're just too many.
Good evening, Bongani. Good evening, all the listeners. Yeah, I think it is madness. And probably we have predators in our school who are preying on these children. I mean, this person is 43 years of age. And this child knows nothing about relationship, does not know anything about now. So it simply means that this old man is taking advantage of these children. Probably, well, we do have those type of ill people in our schools. And we believe that it is time that we deal decisively with those
absolutely, we must deal decisively with it, but quite often parents who are trapped in this situation, because we tend to associate these things with violence, but the nature of sexual grooming means that sometimes the learners will be allies of their own abusers.
Of course, the socio-economic conditions that we find ourselves in, and they do add to that type of situation. But you see, as much as we know that these children, some of them are involved in this type of things because the perpetrators give them something to take in. And we are saying the perpetrators should not take advantage of that situation and misuse this worth.
What do frustrated parents do? Xolani, let me bring you in this conversation. The unions in particular have sometimes been seen as an obstacle to dealing with these things, because obviously you want to look after your members, some of whom are accused of these egregious acts.
Let me greet you, Bongani. Let me greet the viewers as well. Well, on the contrary, and as a matter of fact, the unions in their very nature, yes, we've got an obligation towards representing members in whatever case that could be. But in such a case, we view this as a very gross predatory behavior. And our biggest concern as SAD in particular, is the impact that it has on the image of the profession. Right? I mean, recently we have seen a spate of violence within the school environment, and our view is that teaching is no longer that profession that used to be viewed in a very positive light. Now, the minute you've got teachers who are violating a very critical principle of in loco parentis, that means that they must also accept some of the responsibilities delegated to them from parents.
They're the parents in the classroom,
absolutely,
right?
And I mean, we find it absolutely unacceptable. As a matter of fact, SADTU just recently, less than a month ago, we signed a very important collective agreement, which says that it sort of facilitates the process whereby a teacher will be involved in a disciplinary case, right? It makes the resolutions process quite quicker, and it protects the learners in a case of that they're a witness or a victim, and SADTU signed that. So
we'll talk about that agreement in a moment, but that obviously also looks at situations where teachers are appealing. You say all the right things now, but quite often you're the first, as unions, I'm not talking about SADTU specifically, but broadly, the unions are the first to jump and tell us about due process until the person has been found guilty, and quite often that means the very teachers who are accused stand and continue to have authority over the very children who are their victims.
But that is precisely why then this collective agreement actually becomes very important in this particular conversation. You know, the nature of a union is that, yes, you have got a particular legal obligation towards a member, right? So we might be there to ensure that processes are followed, but ultimately we are not there to blindly
So do you support
sexual
the
predators.
immediate suspension of a teacher who's been accused in this way?
Absolutely. In fact, we have already released a statement calling for the immediate suspension of teachers who are alleged to be behaving in such a manner. Because, like I said, to us, it's about the image of the profession, which we are obsessed with protecting.
Let me bring you into this conversation as the representative of the department. I mean, there was an SABC exclusive just a couple of weeks ago about a school in northern KZN. There, several teachers are accused. A number of learners are involved. And part of the story was that initially when this emerged, the official channels were notified, but the teachers, the authorities in the district rather protected the teachers who were accused until the story was on the SABC. That kind of thing also happens as well.
Good morning, Xolani, and good evening,
Bongani.
To the viewers at home. This is it's a big concern for us as a department, especially in a situation where our laws are very clear in terms of what the official position should be, how the teachers should actually conduct themselves when they are at work, but not only at work, even in the community, because the status of a teacher,
Sure.
even in the olden days, you are a teacher through and through. So
Yeah, that's the
do-
ideal situation. I'm
Yes.
asking you, what happens in cases like the one I've outlined, where this matter was reported through the correct channels, but instead in that particular district, the authorities sided with the teachers and tried to keep this matter hush-hush. That kind of thing happens. What's the response of the department
It's
in
against
cases
the
like
law for any. It's tantamount to defeating the ends of justice, because officials know what the law provides, and it's very clear that any teacher who has a sexual relationship with a learner is a dismissible offense, and any teacher who tries to hide or who tries to defend the perpetrator is in cahoots, is an accomplice, and is actually committing an act of misconduct and is liable for disciplinary action.
But once again, it takes exposés like the one I've just referred to
Yes.
put a spotlight on that particular matter. What's your explanation then? Because here you are, you're saying all the right things. Anybody
Yes.
watching our conversation would agree with you. What goes wrong between the attitude you are having here and what's actually happening out there?
I think one of the issues that we need to deal with as a department is to make sure that all elements of society, from parents, from communities, are aware of the various channels that are available in case they experience cases of this nature. We have channels
Sure,
within
I
the
accept that.
department. We've got channels as provided for our professional councils. So there are opportunities
Sure.
to actually report these
I understand
cases.
that in terms of what happens once things go wrong, but
Yes.
you were talking now about, what we remember teachers being
Yes.
in the old days. What's gone wrong? What's changed? How do you as a department explain this?
The problem is that the outlook of the society generally has changed. Things that happen in our schools are a reflection of things that happen in our broader society. So it's not only about what schools must do, it's about what as a society and the parents, the teacher unions, how can we hold hands together to ensure that we fight this scourge at homes and in our schools?
Do we take seriously, and any one of you can answer this one, do we take seriously the concept of statutory rape? The idea that having or engaging in sexual activity with a minor is statutory rape. It is a form of rape.
Let me come in there, Bongani. I think that there is also an element of a lot of advocacy work that needs to be done. Just recently, contextualizing it with what you've just said, just recently we had a National School Safety Summit, right, whereby we brought in all the stakeholders within the particular education system to actually try and carve out a way forward in terms of how we deal with violence in schools. But you see, what you can never overemphasize is the fact that the degenerating learning and teaching environment in our schools must actually be seen as a national crisis that it is beginning to be. But also I want to bring in another element. When you speak of statutory rape, there are also cases whereby you would find that when there is such a case being reported, the parents would actually be the first to protect such predatory teachers, which we actually do not want in our system.
I mean, let's be controversial, but also let's call a spade, and I'll bring you, Matakanye, into this. I mean, there's also this notion of let's solve problems the African way. So, in other words, a predator has been identified, as you just pointed out, Xolani, and then it's a discussion around, well, let's have a fine imposed on the person, as if this is something that can be contained within communities.
Bongani, it is true. Perhaps when we say teachers, maybe that word is misplaced. I think maybe we have to call them as we said earlier on, the predators. We have this type of people.
The thing is, they don't come to the children as predators. There's nothing written on them that says, I'm correct. On the prowl. The child sees a teacher. That's the relationship develops because there's a trust.
Yes, there is this illness called pedophile. And I think before even I come to the African way of trying to resolve these matters, the pedophile is illness. And I think it is time that the department have to put a mechanism to try and identify these people before even they go into schools.
How do they do that?
I don't know. I'm just saying maybe it's a matter that we must debate now to say, how do we identify the pedophiles? Because I mean, pedophile is an illness where you feel like sleeping with children. I mean, you just given an example of a 15-year-old child sleeping with a 42-year-old.
All right, we'll talk about how we can look at keeping tabs on the people who do this.
Coming back to this question,
the complicity of communities, of parents in this kind of thing. The African way is just one example. There are others. How do we deal with that?
It is true what my comrade here have said, that we have to start mobilizing communities to say, let's let our past history go. Because our past history was that now things must be done homely, must be done commonly, and must be done in the community and all those things. There were reasons why we're doing things that way. And I think we have to free ourselves from the past and say, now things have changed. Now, if this happens, irrespective whether I find myself in this type of economic situations, then it's a crime. And the crime must just be reported to the relevant authority. And in your case, it's the police.
Dr. Enoch, I mean, do we have a teacher sex pest register?
Well, we do have a register of sexual offenders, and that register is kept by the Department of Justice. And then we also have another register that is kept by the Department of Social Development.
Shouldn't we have one? Shouldn't we have one register where any perpetrator, any offender who's been found guilty of this kind of offense, it's easy for people who hire educators to be able to log into that system and identify such perpetrators?
Well, we're looking at ways of making sure that access to the register is made user-friendly, so that employing...
Because the reality is not every teacher who gets employed has been vetted through that system.
Yes, in fact, the accessibility of some of these registers, it's something that is a bit of a problem for us. So we are currently engaging the relevant departments to
What's the problem?
Well, part of the problem is that, for an example, the register of sexual offenders, in its current status, it cannot be used. It cannot be accessed.
What do you mean?
No, when the register itself was designed, it was not designed for it to be used for this purpose. And the procedure of getting people logged into the register, there has to be a court order before you can ensure that...
So in other words, then, what you're saying is the majority of offenders are not on that register, and really there's no way to identify them until a child has been a victim.
They may be in the register, but access to the register is currently restricted.
So nobody knows?
Yes. But then we're looking at other measures, of course, of ensuring. Of course, the Department of Justice is addressing that issue as a matter of urgency because of the scourge that is currently there, but also as a department, as well as our Council of Educators, we are looking at other measures.
So at this stage,
screen and ensure that people that we employ, we can get clearance from the police and all of that. So we're putting those measures in place.
But at this stage, then, I suppose it should hardly be a surprise that we find ourselves in this situation. We've been asking our viewers to send comments to reflect on this issue. The question we've been asking them is, what should happen to teachers who are found to have impregnated learners or even sexually assaulted them? Let's take a listen to what people have been saying.
Hi, my name is Travolta. I'm calling from Mpumalanga. Yeah, I'm hoping these people, they're doing these things knowing that they will get away with it. So the best thing is, I say, they should be punished in a way that the qualifications or whatever they have to qualify them to teach these kids must be withdrawn permanently. Thank you.
Teachers who assault school children sexually, they should be scrapped off as professional teachers, and they should also face jail time. As a result, that will also teach the other teachers not to offend school children. Thank you.
To teachers who sexually insult our children and be involved in sexual activities with them, it is so unacceptable. How do we entrust our children's future into such people's hands? Let their teaching certificate just be scrapped up and them being sent to jail. And I plead to our justice system to be strengthened up. Please.
Talk to me then, what happens when a teacher has been accused of being involved with a learner? What are the steps that have to happen, Xolani?
Well, I mean, there are a number of steps. The department has put in place a system which we also consented to. And part of that is that there is the reporting phase. And then from there onwards, there is a phase that will involve the school management team, the school
from day one, a teacher has been fingered. What happens on that day?
Well,
Do they go back to the classroom tomorrow?
Well, I mean, surely that is also a question that I'm sure the department would want to come into the picture. But the question is that, what is our view? Our view is that there should be a punitive way in which we harshly deal with those, and that could involve even immediate suspension whilst investigations are ongoing and continuing, because you cannot have a person in that particular environment, whereas you still want to actually come up with a conclusive a resolution on a particular matter.
All right, Mr. Rabotapi, what happens? Day one, a teacher has been fingered. What happens?
There
what
are
the
three
steps?
authorities that will deal with such a case. Firstly, from the department point of view, as soon as a case is reported...
this is not a case with the police?
Even at the school level, because the first line of reporting is the principal of a school.
Who is sometimes the perpetrator himself?
Yes, in that case, then the next level, which is the circuit manager or the district manager, must take charge.
Right.
And whoever is responsible, as soon as they become aware of this instance, they must quickly establish the facts, and then the teacher must be suspended so that an investigation can ensue.
So as those facts are being established, what happens to the teacher?
Well, the teacher may be suspended, and then a formal investigation will be launched into the actual as to what happened, and the teacher will have to go through the disciplinary process. The second authority is the South African Council of Educators. From the department, the teacher will be charged in terms of the act that through which that teacher is employed. But from the South African Council of Educators, it's got a code of professional ethics, and that teacher would have contravened that code and says as an authority would then take action.
Yet we
and
know.
The third leg is, of course, the criminal one, where the case will have to be reported to the police.
Yet we know there have been scenarios where teachers have been suspended and yet not fired, and told that on condition they don't reoffend, they can continue teaching. We certainly know that there have been situations where investigations have happened, and whilst that process is being concluded, the teachers are still in the classroom. That sort of thing isn't the exception.
Yes, we do acknowledge that within our own system there are limitations, there are officials who are complicit, there are officials who sometimes don't do what they are supposed to do, and that is precisely because of some of the complicating elements where they come in cahoots with the perpetrators and the parents and the bribes and all. So the whole environment sometimes is muddied. But at the end of the day, as a department, we've got to ensure that people who are responsible are held accountable.
We live in a culture, in a society where, you know, the young people talk about slay queens, where there is transactional sex that happens, where there are blessers, where there are sugar daddies. That phenomena is still very commonplace in this country, particularly, of course, with many people really facing tough economic circumstances. We've seen child-headed households where there doesn't seem to be a parental figure. I mean, I read a stat the other day, 4 million South African children do not live with either their mother or father. Many of our youngsters are still vulnerable.
Noted, Xolani.
Bongani.
However, adults should not take advantage of that situation. We have to nourish these children, we have to raise these children in a manner that they will be future leaders. But, you know, if we find ourselves in those situations and misuse our children, then we're destroying this country. Because it is true that the history that we come from, we are still stuck in it. And hence, you'll find that as a parent, you'll find that I am in a relationship with that child. But because I'm able to provide bread in that house, then I become a sugar daddy or any other person that is referred to, because I'm giving them buy electricity and buying water in that house and all those things. But it is really, really moral unacceptable. We can't accept that type of society. We must really stand up and we are calling upon parents to say, parents, stand up, parent, stand up and be involved in the education of the children.
The parents
and
aren't
then
always
also,
there.
I mean, lastly, is a question where there are no parents in those. But we are saying it takes a village. I think it's an African proverb.
Yeah.
It takes a village to raise a child. And what we mean is, your child is my child. The next door's child is my child. So we have to nurture that. We have to
Gentlemen, we've run out of time. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to the Education Labour Relations Council issue, but if nothing else, perhaps the takeout from this conversation is, as you say, it takes a village. It takes parents, it takes the teachers and the unions, it takes the department, it takes society at large to look at this issue.
Absolutely.
But certainly things cannot continue as they have been. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining us this evening. That was, of course, Xolani Fakude, Enoch Rabotapi and Matakanye Matakanye joining us this evening to talk about this. You can continue, of course, the discussion on Twitter. The hashtag is FullView. That's it for this week.